Why did you get fired? I got fired from CVS for dropping a box of crackers from a shelf. My 90-year-old boss said I did it purposely and I am out to get her. WTF. The old drop the crackers scheme. You almost got away with it. I worked at a motel when I was younger, graveyard shift. I worked at the front desk and also took care of laundry. We were a smaller motel, so I rarely had check-ins after midnight, and laundry took all of 2 hours. The rest of the time I worked on homework, watched movies, and slept. Not a bad job for someone in college. On Christmas Eve, we had someone call out, so I came in and worked the 3p-11p shift, and then worked my normal shift. The owner came in about 6 AM and told me, not asked, told, that I would be working the next shift as well. I respectfully told her that I would not be, that I had already worked 2 shifts and was going to spend the rest of Christmas with my family. Her response was that if I didn't work it, don't bother coming in for my next shift, which was that night. I tossed her the keys and wished her the best of luck in finding someone to work Christmas morning and the next 2 shifts since I wouldn't be returning. Funny thing, I got a call from her at 11:30 that night asking why I wasn't there. I reminded her that she had fired me that morning since I refused to stay, and she said that she was just kidding. I told her I wasn't kidding, and hung up the phone. Good move. She'd have just fired you again when it was more convenient. Got hired as a bartender to replace the boss's son who had decided to move to Colorado. After working for a week, got pulled aside and was told I was fired for being too slow. I came in the next week to pick up my check and guess who's back behind the bar working? Apparently he changed his mind about moving. I was fired from Zayre's, a Canadian grocery store, for not getting paid. I put in a transfer from one store to another, but the head office was taking too long to process the transfer, so I worked for 2 months without getting paid. I spoke to the cash office at work, my immediate supervisor, and my union rep. I was assured that the situation was being handled. After those 2 months, I was sick of working for free, so I told my manager that I wasn't going to come back in until I got paid. He said that was fine with him. The next day, I got a call from one of the store managers, telling me that she could give me $100 in cash and then look into seeing if I'm owed anything else. I said no. The next payday, I got the $1,000 plus I was owed, so I went back in. My manager told me that I had been fired for skipping work, and the union let me know I could file a grievance over it the day before the deadline was up. TLDR. Gave corporate too many chances to sort it out. They did nothing, then fired me when I had enough. I was a preschool teacher. A 2-year-old who I didn't even know could talk told her parents that I slapped her. I was terminated immediately. I cried for a week. I think this is why I tend to be as unimpressed with children as I am. Children can be adorable, but the whole innocence thing is so phony. Some of the worst liars and manipulators in the world are children. I got fired from graveyard shift, 11 PM to 7 AM, at a gas station because I would read books from 3 to 6 when there were no customers and nothing to do. Apparently I was supposed to stand at my till and stare straight ahead. I don't know. I was reprimanded as a cashier at 7-Eleven for reading a magazine at 3 AM. It took me approximately 5 hours after that to decide that I didn't want to work at a place that reprimanded me for reading magazines at 3 AM. Boss hired boss's buddy, who promptly did no work and started screwing around with the client money. I called him on it. I was fired from a coffee shop for a stupid reason once. I was on my way home from a shift when I realized I had promised my girlfriend I would make her a drink before I left work. I said whatever, I'll just stop by the location nearest my apartment and buy it for her there. I walked in, still wearing my store branded uniform t-shirt, so the barista says, "Oh hey, you work for? You shouldn't have to pay, I'll give you this for free." I balked at first, saying no, don't worry, I'll pay, but everyone working at the time agreed I should get a free drink. They insisted and wouldn't take my money, so I caved. As soon as the drink was made, and the barista goes to hand it to me, out of the back bursts this angry looking manager with huge bushy eyebrows, furiously scowling at me. He starts yelling, "Who are you? Where do you work? Do you really think you can scam me like that? Who do you take me for?" He grabs the drink away from me, spilling it everywhere. points to the door and starts screaming out until I left. The next day when I arrived at my location, my manager takes me aside and shows me a series of CCTV printouts from the security camera at the other location I went to. He says the manager claimed I was demanding free drinks, claiming that I deserved them and if I didn't get them for free I would call corporate. No amount of explaining could convince him I actually wanted to pay for that drink. Methinks the co-workers at the other coffee shop threw you under the bus when their manager asked what went on. I worked at a gas station several years back. The policy there was to pump your gas, then pay inside. If people pumped their gas and left without paying, I was not allowed to do anything about it. I couldn't say anything to the customer, wave them down as they drove, or anything else. Also, there were no cameras outside. With all these awesome policies, of course people stole gas all the time. I got fired due to the gas station's crappy policies. They told me I was causing too many drive-offs. That was 5 years ago when I was a student. I still avoid Speedway gas stations at all costs. Speedway gas stations give out free gas. Thanks for the tip. For incompetence, I was a filing clerk at a courthouse. 2 weeks later I read in the paper how my boss was arrested for embezzlement. I'm thinking I wasn't so incompetent, and she was more like a shady bayek. Incompetence probably meant might be smart enough to catch me as I embezzle. When I was in high school I was a shift lead at KFC. I got fired on Christmas Eve for closing 15 minutes early because we ran out of chicken. Chicken takes 15 minutes to cook. Merry Christmas. I only wanted a side of mashed potatoes, you butthole. I worked as a delivery boy, a late night slice guy at a pizza shop near my college. Winter break rolls around. I get told that since students aren't, there are no late night shifts, so I'd pick up again in January. Come January I go back to see where I am in the schedule and the owner avoids me and never lets me know. Eventually, my friend that also worked there told me that everyone that worked there prior to winter break was fired. BC the owner had worked a late night and some drunk butthole tried to scam him by saying that the regular guys give away free slices and drinks. He decided to just fire everyone and hire a new staff. Plan for getting a job. 1. Wear disguise. 2. Get drunk. 3. Talk crap to some small retail place's owner about the staff. 4. Wait for mass firing. 5. Apply for newly opened job vacancy. Not me, but a buddy of mine, on his last day of work, was told he was fired from BJ's because his till had come up $200 short the day before. They said he was fired and he was forced to sign paperwork basically saying he was guilty. It's BJ's policy that large shortage is required to be reported, which it wasn't. Turns out a few months later the manager on duty was arrested for stealing a bunch of money out of employees' tills. TL. DR. Buddy of mine was fired because his manager stole money out of his till. Reddit. Don't sign that crap, especially something that says you committed a crime. Good God, people. I was hired to work the newly installed ice cream section at a little mom and pop restaurant about 15 years ago. First day there I was trained on how to properly clean the machines by the guy who installed them. But that night the owner came up to me and told me he wanted them cleaned differently, in a way that would save them money but would definitely not get the machines as clean as they should be. I decided to ignore the boss. He saw me. I was fired. However, he had been drinking that evening and I assumed he wouldn't remember. Went in the next day as though I hadn't been fired and kept working there for another few years. That is awesome. I recorded my first CD. You see, I worked in a pizza place and truly hated my tenure there. The co-workers were rude. Customers were rude. It was really a stereotypically bad job. However, as a poor student studying music, I kept on to it since I didn't think I could find anything else. So one day I learned that my services would be needed to record a CD. I told my job roughly 2 months in advance that I would need 2 weeks off to record. They said it was fine, and to remind them when it came closer. So I proceeded to tell them at least one time a week, hey guys, remember that I need those 2 weeks off. So I have 2 weeks before I leave, and I talk to my manager and give him the last details of everything. His idea, my last day of work. They all tell me good luck and they can't wait to hear it. The last day of recording. Also my birthday. My friend sends me a text telling me I got fired over a week ago for not showing up for work. TL. DR. Manager never wrote down time I was taking off. I got fired for it. I'm pretty sure the manager just wanted you gone. That is something he could have cleared up in a 2-minute talk. One time I got a job working for an independent businessman who ran a small business selling computers, parts and services. It was the IT guy and basically responsible for doing all the legwork. Things were okay for the first week or so, but then things started to get funny. I noticed that he had only one copy of Windows and would just install it over and over again on every PC he sold without purchasing additional licenses. That's illegal, but I thought it might be on oversight on his part, so I pointed it out to him and told me to shut up and mind my own freaking business. I didn't like it, but I needed the $$, so I shut up. Then one day he asked me to go install a hard drive in a lady's computer at her workplace. He told me to bring back the old drive and any other parts she might have laying around because she's stupid and won't know the freaking difference. I told him that's stealing, but again, he insisted this is how things work and that I should mind my own freaking business. I installed her drive, but refused to steal her parts. We into a big fight over it, and he told me if I pulled that crap again, I'd be fired. The next day I took a spy pen camera into work and waited for him to tell me what to do. He called me into his office and told me how I was supposed to go install and network together a bunch of computers for a local client, but he wanted me to make sure he could backdoor log into the network, so he could read all their files and access their data without them knowing it, support them remotely, and he gave me the one Windows CD to set them up. I did set them, but didn't make him a backdoor. Also, I told the client to call and ask for copies of all the license keys for the copies of Windows. When he did, my boss had a cow. He fired me over the phone. I recorded that too. Then I went to the police station and told them the whole dang story, recordings and all, and they went and arrested him. Schmuck. Okay, so it's my turn. I was teaching at this little technical education company that was going downhill quickly. I was probably too vocal in my objections to the way the management was taking us. They'd been wanting to fire me for months, but I was the highest rated instructor in the company and made them the most money. So finally the call came that I knew was coming and they were really insistent that I bring my laptop in today. I got delayed and called saying I'd be late, and again, you have to bring that laptop in. This got me a bit suspicious, so I purposely left it in the trunk of my car when I came in. So the local manager, John, is sitting there all indignant and hands me a check for my last few days and expenses, but he left out the back vacation I was owed. When I asked about that, he said there wasn't any, even though I had documentation to prove I had it. So we're at an impasse and the laptop comes up. I got up, headed for the door and said, "You'll get the laptop when I get my vacation pay." He was all yelling threats to call the police, but I knew he wouldn't. Last thing he wanted was the Department of Labor up his butt. 2 weeks to the day later, the company owner closes the whole company and fires everyone else there. I never got my vacation pay but kept a decent laptop. I too worked briefly for one of these places. The owner was a scumbag and would have sold his mother for $1. I've only been fired once, and it was complete balls. I was working at Pap Murphy's Take and Bake Pizza in my town, newly opened, and there was this complete bee working there. As you may know, you can call ahead and order a pizza to be ready for pickup, and on the day in question, I answered the phone in the midst of an argument with the aforementioned bee. She used some choice language while I was taking the order, and the customer heard it. The next day, the customer called back to complain, and the only people working were the bee and an assistant manager who was not a big fan of me. The bee rearranged the story so that I was the one who swore, and I got canned without even being given the opportunity to defend myself. Freaking douchebags. I was a bartender at a sports bar. One of the policies was that we couldn't drink there on a day we had worked, and on our day off we could, but were limited to 2 drinks. Well, it was my day off, and I was waiting for a buddy to get off work so we could have dinner, and I had 3 beers. The owner was at a table eating. I knew he was there, but I had worked there for 1-2 years and really didn't think he'd care, as he was well into his 5th bourbon and coke, and saw me. After my next shift the GM came up to me and said sorry, but that was your last shift here. I won unemployment less than 16 hours later and took him for over 7 grand. D. My employer was giving pay cuts and telling us the execs hadn't taken a paycheck in a year just to stay afloat. We knew it was a lie. They made us pay for all of our medical coverage. We were working a solid 50-60 hour week and making pennies. All while they decided to hire 2 new employees that we didn't need in the first place. Well, I started servicing their clients on the side cause they loved me so much and hated the company and was eventually found out and canned. And of course, they threatened legal action but didn't do anything. Today I'm still working with those clients making 3x my pay before and loving being my own boss. 11:30. I am a co-worker, a silly joke involving calling our boss and butthole. We chuckle. 11:35. My friend calls my cell phone and asks if I want to come see his new workplace and possibly get offered a job. 11:36. I zip out the door, telling everyone I'm going on my lunch break. 11:40. 12:30. I tour my friend's new workplace and have an informal interview with his boss, with no resume prepared, no references, nothing except my degree in the field and the good word of my friend who just got hired. 12:40. I go back to my workplace to find my butthole boss sitting at my desk, running a Windows search on my workstation. I ask him what he's looking for. He responds, "Whatever's there." 1300 hours. I resume normal operations. 1700 hours. My butthole boss returns to my desk, hands me a letter and tells me I'm fired. Hilarity ensues. Apparently he had been known to sit and snoop on other people's computers. I was so overly eager to jump at a new job opportunity that I stupidly forgot to close my IM window. I got hired at the other place a couple days later. Been there ever since. Well, my time in the office started to go downhill when I corrected my boss on the different forms of their. I was sending a letter out to a community group and was using their. For example, their concerns are, my direct boss kept saying I was using the wrong there, and they were tired of having to continually clean up my work. So I emailed them and their direct boss, the big boss, the 2 definitions of there and there, and apologized for the oversight. After that, literally everything I did was wrong in some way, to the point that she started editing my weekly reports to the big boss. Oh yeah, and she took credit for the largest success the office had in 2 years. This is why the world is fricked. Unreasonable buttholes who take crap personally. I got fired from my first job working a movie theater because I did not own, could not afford the right shade of khaki pants. No joke. Yay. It's such bulls when companies make you pay for your uniforms, especially when you are making minimum wage. At $8 HR, it takes the entire 4-hour shift to afford a decent pair of pants. I worked as a medical assistant instructor for a for-profit college. I got fired because the dean thought that I was falsifying grades when I just came to pass that my students were all getting good grades and were passing their labs. They were used to the population getting bad grades because they had many bad instructors that were stuck in archaic ways of teaching. Also, they were threatened by the fact I was the youngest instructor they had. I was 26 at the time, the next youngest was 35. So I do believe there was some ageism at play. Also, after working there for some time, I got the feel of how for-profit schools, career colleges, work, and I started to tell students that they would get more from a 3-year and actually pay the same amount. The staff caught wind of that and I was scolded for it twice. My philosophy is that it was never about my paycheck. I went to work every day to give the students the skills they needed for a job and higher education, even if those goals were better suited at a different, better college. I gave the students everything to succeed, but to the staff it wasn't about student success. It was about putting as many people in a crowded classroom as possible and cashing in even if they didn't get jobs after the school, which the recruiters promised the students. I was working as a radiologic technologist at a crappy hospital in Albany, NY. I came in hungover one morning and to my horror I had an 8 AM 89 yo barium enema patient under isolation. Isolation means they had some real infectious bug going on inside them, and a barium enema is basically a procedure where I stick a plastic tube up someone's butt and pump barium into their bowel for examination under X-ray. I was horrified as sometimes healthy, Young patients crap everywhere during the exam, let alone an old walking corpse. Right after I prep for it, I get called into the manager's office and she fires me for calling out of work last week. I laughed and strolled right out the door. Relevant name. Told my boss that I thought it was perfectly acceptable that her sister was dating a black guy. Got my last check the next day. Worked as a file clerk for Farmers Insurance. I hate them and was fired because the daycare called and said my son was running a fever, I needed to come get him. At the time I was a single parent with no other family or backup support in the entire state. The manager came to me and said, we have to let you go because you can't finish your shift. I think you should get your personal life together before you try working again. I just stared at her and she started getting nervous, shifting from foot to foot and wringing her hands. I said, Mom, I don't know how else I am supposed to get my personal life together if I don't have a job. I hope whatever my kid is sick with isn't contagious and that you don't have to stay home one day. They might fire you too. We are farmers, Bumby dum dum dum, you're fired. 18 years old, working as a housekeeper. I worked under the owner and she would give me the keys to certain homes and they were my responsibility. I got paid less than half of what she charged an hour and I took care of those houses completely by myself. After a good 9 months working for her, and with those clients, I built up good rapport with the clients and sometimes they would invite me to parties or dinner. One week I noticed my schedule allowed 4 days of no work. So I decided to buy tickets to bumper shoot with some friends. After 3 days of boozing, music, smoking pot and causing heck, I drove back home. At this time I had a crap cell phone and it only worked locally. As soon as I crossed into whatever was considered local, my phone started showing I had a message, then 2, then 30. Turns out my boss had called to see if I wanted to cover one of her houses, and when she couldn't get a hold of me she assumed I had taken off and was going to rob all the houses for which I had keys to. She said I put her name at risk by taking off and that I was fired. As soon as the clients found out, she fired me, and for something so ludicrous, they fired her and hired me for the same price. I ended up going from minimum wage to $22 an hour, and she lost half her business. She called me and asked me to come back at $1 raise. I then informed her of how much I was making working for myself and told her in the politest way possible to go frick herself. TLDR, accused of stealing, got fired. A week later I ended up doing the same job as my own boss for more than twice as much. Frick bosses, run your own company. I was let go with at will, unsatisfactory work performance written on my paperwork, but it had more to do with the fact that I refused to forge tax documents. I worked at a hotel for about 3 years during college, a Marriott to be exact. I usually worked the 3:11 shift but would sometimes be scheduled for first shift 7:3. Well, the general manager of this property was a woman, a cougar to be exact. She was 40, thousands of miles away from her husband. She was in the process of moving from Texas and lonely. So what did I decide to do? You guessed it. After a very brief courting, I was shagging the lamplights out of my boss in the room she was staying in at the hotel. Well, we kept this secret for obvious reasons and kept in quiet for about a month. I will never ever forget what happened next. It was a Tuesday morning. I was scheduled this day to work 7 AM to 3 PM, and when I arrived I saw my boss in her office, said good morning and went and relieved the third shift person. After the third shift guy left, we were alone until 8 AM when the first housekeepers would arrive. She called me into her office and locked the door and we began screwing like wild rabbits. I mean, really going at it. Well, her desk was next to a big window, like a bay window in her office. We were in the act of doing it doggy when she felt the need to grab the wall next to the window for support. Except she missed and grabbed the blinds to the window and crashed. The whole thing of blinds came down, leaving us fully exposed. And who just so happened to be parked in the space with a direct view of the window? Our district manager, who was there for surprise inspection. I'm not sure how much he saw, but I know we didn't see him at first. Needless to say, we were both asked to leave the property. I never saw this woman again. Nice. Definitely too late to the game, but my friend quit his job like this. My co-worker, Matt, when I worked in a museum, took pictures of guests in front of the displays for purchase later. Well, This camera was set up to wirelessly deliver the pictures to a kiosk where they could purchase the picture they were in. This kiosk had large 60 inches displays where the customer's pictures were automatically shown a few minutes later. Well, on his last day, around noon when we were the most busy, Matt took a fat crap, took dozens of pictures of his defecation, and the pictures were shown on the large displays to the museum goers' horror. He then went around, taking pictures of customers' faces as they watched all the pictures of his turd shuffle through the displays. 5 minutes later, Matt strolls out the main entrance exit, never to return. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.